So we are looking at Ulladu Narpadu, which translates to that which is, simply the 40 verses on that which is. Narpadu means 40 and Ulladu means that which is. So there are 40 verses composed by Ramana Maharshi on the nature of truth. It's actually 42 verses because there are two invocatory verses and then there are 40 verses. And these 42 verses comprise the essence of the nature of self, what is true God realization, and what is surrender. All of this is described beautifully in this work. We have been going through this work over many sessions, and we have so far completed 32 verses. So we have the last 8 verses, which we hope to complete today. The important thing to first recognize is that unlike, let's say, some academic subject we learn, where we have to build on past knowledge and then there is the necessity to know what is there before and so on. Here, every verse is independent and stands alone in and of itself. And in fact, each verse points to the same reality, which is realized through self-inquiry and surrender, Atma Vichara and Sharanagati, which is the essential teaching of Ramana Maharshi as well as all the great sages of the Upanishads, also of all other traditions as well. The real sages of all traditions have only spoken of one truth, and that truth is described in great detail in this work. So we just have to therefore pay attention to each verse, each word, because it is an Upanishad by itself. Upanishad literally means that which takes us close to truth, close to God. All these words are interchangeable. So self-realization is truly God realization. And therefore, to recognize the true nature of God, the true nature of self, the true nature of the world, is the essence of any Upanishad. And this is also an Upanishad because it's coming directly from a realized sage who had direct perception without the aid of any external knowledge. So everyone is probably aware that Ramana Maharshi did not read any books, did not know anything about Vedanta or any other tradition for that matter. He just directly, through grace, woke out of the dream of ego identification into self-realization, which is true God realization. And then he was in the base of Arunachala, the mountain, and spent 54 years without moving away from that one place and sending that grace out to all. Therefore, his words are the same as any other Upanishad that comes directly from the sage. They come out of the direct authority of the self-abidance of Ramana Maharshi and not out of reading any text or interpreting any other work. So that is the direct grace of any work of such a great sage. And as we enter this last section of this Ulladu Narpadu, we also pointed it out in the beginning as well. It's always true that When we listen to Ulladu Narpadu or any work like this for that matter, we have to listen from our heart, not from the mind. The tendency of the mind is to understand and gather knowledge, compare it with other knowledge we have gained so far. All this is an activity of the mind. The mind is a tool that is operating in time, and it's a necessary tool for transactional purposes. When we are learning, let's say, math or physics or coding or anything, that's where mind is necessary, because we have to build on the knowledge we have gathered and gather more knowledge and all the rest. That process is applicable in the field of transaction, what's called vyavahara. It's true with any transactional activity, not just academic, but let's say we are learning cooking, let's say we are learning to play music. All of these places is where we have to engage the mind. But when it comes to what's called as Atma Vidya, self-knowledge, which is also Bhagavat Vidya, knowledge of God, it's not knowledge in the sense the word knowledge is used otherwise, it's realization. Therefore, what's important first to recognize is to listen from the heart. We don't have to try to figure out anything. We don't have to memorize anything. We don't have to take notes of anything. And we certainly don't have to compare with anything. So the tendency to compare is another activity of the mind, to compare with other things we have heard and see whether this is right or that is right. All of these are activity of the mind. If we just are aware of it as we listen, that's actually a meditation in and of itself. So when we listen, what's called as Shravana in Sanskrit, the very art of listening, Shravana, is a meditation when we listen from the heart. And that doesn't mean we shut off the mind, it means we are aware of the mind. We don't have any conflict then. If the mind comes up with any chatter, let's say, as we said, comparing with something else or agreeing, disagreeing, all of these have to be aware, be in the field of our awareness. If we identify with the movement of the mind and say, yes, this is right, this is wrong, I like this, I don't like this, then that's the mind hijacking our attention. So if we attend fully, we attend also to the mind and the voice of the mind. And by doing so, we are not caught in the partial identification with the mind. We are listening to the whole content, including the activity of the mind, and we just listen fully and it goes directly to the heart. That's the power of the voice of the sage. So with this, we will enter the work. We have gone through 32 verses, as we said, plus the 2 Mangalam or the invocatory verses. The first verse, in fact, contains everything, and therefore it's good to just look at that first part of the verse, which is referred to in multiple places. He says, Ulladalad ulla unarvu ullado. So the question being asked as a question is, can there be a sense of existence without the substrate of truth? Ulladu means the substrate of truth, and ulla unarvu means the sense of existence. Nobody denies that we exist. There is a sense of existence that's innate to our being, whether we think or don't think, whether we act, whether we are engaged in perceptions or we are quiet. There is always the sense that I exist. And that sense of existence is what is being pointed to first. We always, when we come into spiritual inquiry, We are looking for everything outside while ignoring our own sense of existence. We conceptualize God in various ways, but the important pointer that Ramana Maharshi gives in the first verse is your own existence comes from God. So the fact that I exist is the first gift of God. Otherwise, I cannot even do anything. The fact that I exist is not something within any volition. When we wake up in the morning, we immediately recognize that I am, the sense of existence. And that comes on its own. We don't will ourselves to exist. Existence of our presence happens on its own. So the most direct pointer given in the very first line of this work is that that sense of existence is the voice of God in your heart. So we normally, when we look for spiritual inquiry or sadhana or whatever word we use, we are looking everywhere outside. And that has its own merit. So when normally the mind is going always outside, looking for objects of experience of various kinds. So we like to experience different things in the world through sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. So that's why this universe is also in Sanskrit called Prapancha, right? Because Pancha means five. Prapancha means that which is made of five. So the five elements, which are soil, water, fire, air, and space, and the five senses that perceive them, sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch, is what is our experience of the universe. And we always look outside through these senses and these elements for various experiences. And then we recognize that all these experiences are limited. So that's the first recognition that turns us towards even God. Because when we recognize the limited, finite nature of all experiences, whether it be pleasures of various kinds, whether it be goals of various kinds, whether it be relationships, whether it be work, whatever interest one has, all of that is found to be limited. They all come and they all go. And when they go, they leave suffering in its wake. So when we recognize that fact that everything is impermanent, that's the first recognition, that's the sign of true intelligence. So intelligence and intellect are two different things. Intellect is used for various activities, and someone may be very intellectually refined but not have the intelligence to recognize that everything is impermanent. Whereas someone who may not be intellectual at all, who doesn't know any refined philosophy, but he has an innate instinct that everything is impermanent, such a person is intelligent. So intelligence, which is also called viveka in Sanskrit, discernment, is that which recognizes that everything is impermanent. The whole material energy always changes. The body is changing, thoughts are changing, feelings are changing, relations are changing, job is changing, everything is changing. We lose our parents, the kids go away. So everything, nothing remains fixed. Everything changes. And if we hold on to anything, there is suffering. So the first thing for us to therefore recognize is to gracefully accept the impermanence of this world. And to accept that is already the beginning of wisdom. Then we look for that which is permanent, because there is an innate sense of permanence within us. There is a famous story in Mahabharata where Yaksha asks Yudhishthira about what is the most surprising thing. And Yudhishthira says the most surprising thing of all is that everybody sees others dying around them and they think they're going to live forever. So there are two ways to look at the story, right? One is the apparent ignorance of all of us. We see so many people dying around us and we somehow make plans forever, thinking that we are going to live forever. So that's what Yudhishthira points out, is the ignorance of that. But there's another way to look at it, which Ramana Maharshi pointed out beautifully. Again, a true sage alone points this out very interestingly, which is that he said it's not wrong that we think that way because we are actually eternal. There is an eternal aspect of our living which refuses to acknowledge the impermanence of everything. And because of that, we have this instinct that we are going to be forever, which is the right instinct because the soul is eternal. But we superimpose that on the body, on the mind and relations and all that. So the instinct is not wrong. The way it is perceived is wrong. So therefore, that instinct comes out of the recognition that there is something within us which is permanent, regardless of everything being impermanent. And we call that as God. So when we say God, we see the whole universe changing, and we have to posit that there has to be some source for this universe. So one of the verses, the very first verse, in fact, after the two Mangalam verses, he says, Naam ulagam kandalal nanavam shakti ula or mudalai uppal oru talaye. He says, because we see this world of various elements and various powers, it is only appropriate to posit that there is one source of all. And that source is what we call God. And this is the same instinct of everyone. So even a physicist, that's why he's after the unified theory, because they see all the various forces like gravitation and electromagnetism and nuclear forces and all, and they still search for the one unifying force because there is the instinct that everything has to come from one source. Every scientist has it, everyone has it. So that is what is pointed to, that there is the instinct that there is one source for all powers, and that source we call God. Then we project that as a concept. Then what the mind does is it imagines that God to be in some time and space, in some location, and then project an idea of heaven, and then say, I have to go there, and all of that. And in that process, we create a lot of division because the mind operates differently in different people. So each one projects, and then that causes religions to form. One religion says God is this way, another religion says God is that way, and they fight. All of this we see. But the true religion is to inquire into the very essence of God. And that's why the first pointer given by Ramana Maharshi is your own existence comes from God. Ulladu is the presence, the truth. Satyam in Sanskrit, Satyam is the name for God, truth. In Bhagavatam, in fact, when Krishna is about to be born, Brahma comes and offers a beautiful prayer, and he says, the only word he uses in that entire prayer is Satyam. He says, Satyavratam, Satyanetram, Satyasya Satyam, Satya Yonim. So everything about that verse, he says, you are the womb of truth, you are the vision of truth, you are the truth of all truths. So Krishna is glorified by Brahma as simply one word, truth. So when we say God, God is nothing but truth. So that's the word used in Tamil. Ulla Porul means that which is truth. Truth is the name of God. First name of God is truth, Satyam. So that's why Ramana Maharshi points out that truth is the source of your existence. So when you recognize that, then you cannot ever be away from God. That is the first pointer and the last pointer too. As it is said, the first step is the last step. We don't have to make any, there is no steps involved here if we see it correctly. And everything is again making us see only that one step. It is not that there are many steps and we have to, as we said, there is no sequence of knowledge here. It is just one direct perception which is pointed out in every Upanishadic verse. When it says Tattvam Masi, it's pointing to the same truth. You are that already. And that means not you as in you take yourself to be. It is Bhagavan who alone exists. And he appears as the body, as the mind, as the sense of existence. So the I that I take myself to be is always false, because I project this I onto the body, onto the mind, onto the various faculties I have. When we recognize that none of this is real, the only truth is that the sense of existence as I comes forth automatically in the heart, and that is the voice of God in us. So Tattvamasi doesn't mean that I am that, it means that is all there is. That which is God is what you take yourself to be, or I take myself to be. So that is the only truth, and that's what the first line also, it's like a Mahavakya. Ulladalad ulla unar ullado. Without truth, can there be a sense of existence? If we understand that, we understand actually the whole work. So with that clear pointer, we went through all the verses, and then the whole pointer on what is inquiry was given, which is beautifully said as Nan udiyadulla nilai, nam aduvai ulla nilai. That is, without the rising of the ego, to abide as surrendered to God is truth. Adu here represents to God, that, the same word in Sanskrit, tat. Tat alone is, and the tvam, which is you, is only that. So when the tvam is separated from tat, it is the ego. When the tvam is recognized as tat, then the tvam simply surrenders. So that is why true wisdom is bhakti. In Gita 2, Krishna says of the 4 types of devotees, the dearest to me is the jnani. Because the jnani is the one who is completely surrendered. It is not that a jnani is one who has read textbooks, who knows Upanishads, who knows this, knows that. That is not jnana. Jnana in this context is wisdom, which awakens in the heart by recognizing that Bhagavan alone exists. And that devotee, Krishna says, is the dearest to me. So, therefore, true bhakti is jnana, and true jnana is bhakti. There is no difference between the two. And that awakening of bhakti, which is jnana, comes through inquiry. Inquiry is not, again, a scientific inquiry where we are using the mind and analyzing and all of that. The word in Sanskrit we use is vichara. Vichara is again the same meaning. It can be used in the material context for scientific inquiry and all that. Tattva vichara and loka vichara and all. But Atma vichara is different. It's directly going to the heart and recognizing that my very sense of existence rises forth from God. So that's what he says in that verse by saying, Nan udiyadulla nilai, nam aduvai ulla nilai. That state where the ego doesn't rise, but only the presence of God is felt in us. That's the nature of truth. And he says that is true wisdom. Therefore, he also pointed out why reading texts and making any other effort to understand and even saying things such as I am Brahman or any of that is only an aid. But the direct inquiry is to dive within the heart and recognize that my very existence is Bhagavan. I don't exist, only Bhagavan exists. That's the only short recognition. The essence of the whole thing is that God alone exists. God exists in all names, all forms, and what we call God is the truth of our own being and of the whole universe. So that's why it is said the division between us and the world is only as long as we identify with form. Even from a pure scientific perspective, we can see that everything here is simply made of atoms which are coming from a quantum field. So even a quantum physicist would say that all there is only one quantum field, which brings forth an appearance of matter, which then has name and form based on the observer. So it is the observer who projects name and form. So it's not a very difficult thing for us to even see clearly, because even here, let's say we see a tree and we have the name and form of a tree we see. An ant crawling on the tree doesn't have the same experience likely. For the ant, there is no concept of a tree. There is something there and it's crawling. For a bird, it may be a different way. So even here, we can directly see that every name and form is based on our knowledge. And even the same tree will be differently perceived by two different people based on what we know. And we may have some memory with a tree, we may project, but we all have a common language. So we sort of think that there is one world. But in reality, everyone projects their own memories and knowledge to see the world they see. And it's very clearly seen from the perspective of animals, for example. So they say dogs listen to more sounds than we do. Some cows don't see some colors we do. So in reality, there is nothing that exists objectively other than our own memory and knowledge that projects it. So therefore, the main pointer is that the entire world, which is coming forth from this one common field, even from a scientific perspective, we see it as this quantum field, is what brings up the various names and forms, starting with our own name and form. And so when we look at this and say that my very existence that I take myself to be is coming forth from Bhagavan, it's not understandable. It is only that which is. So Kena Upanishad says that one who says I understand it does not know. One who says I can never understand it knows. So the truth is beyond our capability to understand. God is beyond the realm of understanding because He is the source of understanding itself. And that very understanding comes forth from this source as the sense I, the sense then of you and he and she and all of that. So that is the very source of our being. So when we say of self-inquiry, all that is pointed to is to therefore recognize first that you are the sense of existence if you leave out everything else. So we normally identify with thoughts, our body, our ideas, and so on. But if we can easily see the first step in self-inquiry, or the first direct pointer is that none of that is you, and we can clearly see that. The body is not what it was 10 years back. In fact, it's literally not what it was 10 seconds back. We just don't perceive it. But we clearly perceive it when we see a photograph from 10 years ago. The body is not the same. Thoughts are not the same. Every day the thoughts change. Perceptions, feelings, ideas, ideologies, people get associated with this ideology or that ideology, religion, everything can be changed. The only thing one cannot change is that one's own sense of existence. And that sense of existence is therefore our core sense of I. So when I say I, what do you point to? If you ask the question, if you clearly see, we may first, normally in the world, people will point to the photographs there and that's I. But then it's very obvious that the photograph changes over time. Then everything else, as we said, changes. So what is the I? The I is only the sense of existence. I exist. When I touch my heart and say I exist, that is my core sense of I. And to recognize that that very sense of existence is not individual. It is coming forth from Bhagavan. So that's why it was pointed out that in the verse on inquiry, எழும்பும் அகந்தை எழுமிடத்தை நீரில் விழுந்த பொருள் காண வேண்டி. That is, he says, find out the nature of I from the place where it rises. So we find the I rising in the heart and recognize, first come in touch with that I, because we, out of ignorance, we assume and presume that this body is I, the ideas, the thoughts, the philosophies, whatever we carry, the baggage of memory, we think all of that is I, but it only takes clear perception. It doesn't take any time, but it takes clarity to see that none of that is I, because all of that changes all the time. The only true I is the sense of existence. And that sense of existence, once we realize it as coming forth independent of the body, the mind, and all of that, that sense of existence is then offered to Bhagavan, because that comes forth again from the same source. So to funnel it all down, we are normally caught in the outer world of 100 different impressions and rest, funnel it all down to the sense of existence, and then surrender that very sense of existence by recognizing that it comes from Bhagavan. It comes spontaneously on its own, and therefore that is the first voice of God in our heart. So when we recognize that, then we surrender it to Bhagavan, and then we see the divine alone in every moment. We can see that what rises as I is Bhagavan, and then the energy that enables us to see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, think, speak, and act, all of that is coming forth from the same one source, which is the divine energy. We literally cannot, if we slow down, we cannot ever claim ownership to anything that we think we are doing. The eye seeing happens on its own through a very sophisticated, complicated process, and we think I am seeing. I am not seeing. What is seeing is the intelligence that is permeating this body. Same with hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. Same with thinking, speaking, doing anything. So in every realm, whatever perceptions we have, whatever actions we do, are all happening by this infinite intelligence that's operating through each one of us. And we recognize that first by recognizing that our very sense of existence is coming forth spontaneously from Bhagavan, from the source. And it is manifesting as all of these faculties, and it is operating. So when we consciously, with full awareness, dive within and recognize our sense of existence as coming forth from this, then we are free of this false sense of I, and that is self-inquiry. So with that, that is the core pointer. Then if you look at the remaining verses, we are on verse 33 now. So verse 33, I'll read the verse. Ennai ariyeen naan, ennai arindeen naan, ennal நகைப்புக்கு இடனாகும் என்னை தனை விடயமாக்க இருதான் உண்டோ ஒன்றாய் அனைவர் அனுபூதி உண்மையால். So he says, To say that I don't know myself or to say that I know myself are both a matter of ridicule, is the word he uses, nahaippu. Because in reality, we can never, he asks a question, he says, Irutan undo, are there two selves? So when we say, I know myself, or when we say, I don't know myself, the very sentence is very weird, but we say it all the time, right? I mean, who knows who? I know myself, or I don't know myself. I am sick. We say many things like this. I am sick of myself. I am happy with myself. I cannot put up with myself. People, so many such statements come forth, right? All of these, the only question that it's pointed to beautifully is, are there two selves? So if we just pause for a moment and say, what is it? So what is the important pointer here is that in every sentence that we say I, we are actually identifying with a particular memory and we take it as I. And then we look at another memory and we also think that is I. And it is a conflict between these two I's. So when I say I don't like myself, as we said, then the myself that is not being liked is a image in the memory. And the I that doesn't like it is another image in the memory. And one image in the memory doesn't like another image in the memory. That is what we say when we say, I don't like myself. We never recognize it, we think, and then because of this, it's not a theoretical abstract statement, it's a very, unfortunately, practical issue that even drives people to things such as suicide. There are so many people who are depressed who say, I don't like myself, I cannot live with myself. And that thought, when it's taken to its limit, causes depression, causes suicidal tendencies, and so on. But it is only there because of the false sense of I we carry. So that's all that we need to recognize, is that the I that we take ourselves to be is always limited based on memory, based on some image. And that image is always going to be put together through time, and it is therefore limited. It is always going to be lacking something. So you'll say, I want to go to this place in order to be happy, because let's say I have an idea that I have to go on a trip somewhere. I project a sense of happiness on that, and then when it happens, it still leaves us with the same lacuna because something else comes up, because no experience is going to be giving us the taste of the infinite, because every experience is finite. So when we say, I know myself, I want to find out who I am, all of these statements coming forth only because we take me to be a memory. So what is the direct pointer, which is already said, is to recognize the very sense of existence that underlies these questions. When we say, I don't like myself, who is aware of this thought? Is a simple question to ask. When I say I don't like myself, there is an awareness within which exists independent of this thought that I don't like myself. So that awareness within, which is shining in the heart as I, is unaffected by both the false I that says I like myself and the false I that says I don't like myself. All of these are simply projections of memory. We get so pulled into it, and we are so tightly identified with a memory, with an image. So let's say I have an image it's a very practical thing. Let's say I have an image that I am very, let's say, very smart. And then something happens which bursts that bubble because someone points out something I did stupid or whatever it might be, then if I'm so invested in the image that I'm very smart, then I don't like myself because that image has been bursted. So the memory which has put together the image that I'm smart is popped by an event, and the memory that feels good about it has built a self-image based on that is affected, right? So it's a simple example, and it is seen all the time. Teenage kids, for example, caught in social media go through similar thing. They go through peer pressure because they are all caught in images of how they look or how they dress or whatever it might be. And all of that is coming out of the core ignorance of taking myself to be the body, to be the mind, to be the memory, to be any image I have put together. The very body is ultimately, as we can clearly see, an image put together in the mind. I can never experience my own body except through the image in the mind. We cannot, you can look at the mirror and see the body, look at a camera and see how it is, but that's all using memory. The actual intelligence of the body is something that we can never experience. It is just functioning perfectly every moment. But we project an image that this is my body, and then we have various images built on the body, for example, and then based on that we like and dislike and we do various things. Same is true with the mind. So all of these are mental images we carry. So what's pointed to in this verse simply is there are no two selves. That is to say, none of these are yourself. Everything is only a memory. What is truly yourself is that sense of existence, which is there even when you don't have a single thought. And there is not a single thought, who is there? That's the same sense of existence that's there underlying all thoughts as well. So do not be caught in these false idea of self images, and recognize the true self, and recognize that that true self is the presence of God. So that's why self realization is God realization. We are not claiming I as that self, but we are recognizing that the self that rises within the heart is the first felt presence of the universe itself. When we say I, for instance, we go to deep sleep, we get up in the morning and we immediately feel the presence awakening in our heart, and then we figure out the time, the place where we are. Sometimes if we have a very deep sleep, for instance, we come out of it, we may have all experienced it, we don't know where we are. For just a second, it takes a while to recognize where I am, what time is it. Sometimes we may take a nap in the afternoon, but it's very deep and we don't know whether it was nighttime or daytime. So when we get up out of it, for a second, we are just present. Then we figure out the time, the place, then everything comes. That very presence that comes up first when we get up is the presence of our very existence, that I am. And that rises spontaneously. So it is not a willful volitional act at all. Existence happens spontaneously and it goes away spontaneously too. When we go into deep sleep, it goes away. That's why we can never will ourselves to go to sleep. Anyone who tries to go to sleep will know this, right? We can never go to sleep by trying. Sleep comes, sleep goes on its own. And the same is true with life itself, right? Life goes when it goes. So every night we go into deep sleep, it's like a mini death, in fact. And then we get up in the morning and we again start a new day, a new life. And when the whole cycle ends, everything is cyclical. That's why the day, then there is the seasons, there's the years, there is the whole life, and then the whole yuga. Everything is a cycle. So all of this happens spontaneously. So that's why the pointer here is to recognize that the seer and the seen or both images. Anytime we look at any self image and we identify with it falsely, then we are caught in the ego. If we again inquire and recognize that every notion of I have is based on memory and thought. So anything, for instance, nationality, religion, ideology, relationships, all of this requires us to use thought. What is there when we do not engage any thought is our very sense of existence. And that's the true sense of being. Everything else is acquired, and it can come, it can go. But the sense of existence doesn't change. And that is Bhagavan himself. So the next verse, 34. என்றும் எவர்க்கும் இயல்பாய் உள பொருளை ஒன்றும் உளத்துள் உணர்ந்து நிலை நின்றிடாது உண்டு இன்று உரு அரு என்று ஒன்று இரண்டு அன்று என்றே சண்டையிடல் மாயைச் சழக்கு. So he says, everyone, as we already said, has this sense of existence. To not abide in it and to argue that God exists, God doesn't exist, God has form, God has no form, it is Advaita, it is Dvaita. All of this is only due to Maya, he says beautifully. So when we get into spirituality, again, the very common thing we see is people always get into, there are also some arguments. We say, okay, Advaita or Dvaita, non-duality or duality. And then there is also in between a qualified non-duality. So there are many versions that come. So we say God has form or has no form. So some say, oh, how can you worship God with form? And then some say, no, God has this particular form. And then there are some who say God has no form, but they give a name without recognizing that the name is also a form. So there are all these arguments that causes religious divisions of various kinds. There are people who think ascribing a form to God is blasphemy, but then they will have their own images which are built through sound, for example. Sound and light are both form. Light takes a visual form, sound takes a oral form. So all of these debates only come because people are caught in a partial idea of the self as an image, and then they want to protect it. The ego wants to always protect itself, defend itself. So it will get into argument, even Advaita. So let's say someone says, I am an Advaitin. That is another identification of the ego. It is not true non-duality. The one who is truly recognizing the non-dual nature of truth will never claim himself to be Advaitin. That's why there is a nice expression in Tamil. I think it's in other languages too. It says, Tamil, they say, Kandavar, Vindilar, Vindavar, Kandilar. So that means the one who has realized doesn't speak about it. The one who speaks about it a lot doesn't realize. If one constantly says, I am an Advaitin, and he wants to argue and debate with those who are quote unquote Dvaitins and other religions, that is again the same Maya. That's why he says Maya Chark. So anything that comes out of thought causes arguments. So thought has to be put in its right place, which is the essence of also self-knowledge and wisdom. See, the word art, in fact, the Greek word art, the Greek origin of the word art is to put things in its right place. So when we have a house when we put things in the right place, it looks nice. If everything is all over the place, it looks messy. But that's what happens in the mind. We keep the physical place, let's say, fairly organized, but the mind is all chaotic, where everything is all over the place. And we use thought in places where thought ought not to be used, and we don't use thought where it ought to be used, and so on. So, thought is necessary for critical thinking, engaging in activities of the world, properly doing our work, and all the rest. But when we use thought to build images in our mind, use thought to project ideas of heaven and hell, and say that this is right, this is wrong, God is this way, God is not that way, God has form, God has no form. All of these are thought operating where it ought not to operate. It's what it is simply. Thought has no role to play in all this. When the heart is surrendered to God, there is no argument. See, we cannot imagine Meera ever arguing with anyone. Right? We see, of course, the example of Ramana Maharshi. He never argued with anyone. There were people who came. Many people of Muslims came, Christians came, and then religious, even within the Vedic fold, many different persuasions. They all came with their own ideologies, and they all recognized the truth that radiates from the presence of Ramana Maharshi, because he didn't argue with anyone. He said, because from his perspective, everyone is an expression of God. So when we see it, that's the vision of the Jnani, that is the vision of a true Bhakta. Krishna says in the Uddhava Gita, in Bhagavatam, very beautiful portion of Bhagavatam, where Krishna, at the end of his earthly stay, before he departs, gives Uddhava his final instructions. And even in that, in the final chapter, Uddhava listens to everything, and then he asks, give me something that I can just hold on to every moment. And Krishna simply says, see that everyone is me. Right? And he says that in the Gita too. Krishna says in the Gita, Yomam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mayi pashyati tasyaham na pranashyami sachamena pranashyati. Krishna says, who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, he never loses sight of me. Another verse he says, Bahunam janmanam ante jnanavan mam prapadyate vasudeva sarvamiti sa mahatmasu durlabha. One who sees Vasudeva everywhere, Vasudeva sarvamiti, everything is Vasudeva. One who sees that is free. And that is bhakti, that is jnana. And therefore those who even divide the two, again are caught in the same division as it said. Jnana is one marga, bhakti is one marga. No, it's not. If you recognize the truth of what is jnana, which is bhakti. So that's why Krishna says, highest bhakta is a jnani. And highest jnani is a bhakta. So when we recognize this, then there is no argument. We just recognize that every argument comes only out of the mind, which wants to divide, which wants to hold on to something and fortify its own images. So and in no image there is security, because every image is ultimately going to be popped. In fact, it goes away every night when we go to sleep. So we can never carry any image to deep sleep. And every image, that's why we see how those who are the stronger people are caught in an image, the more violent they can be. So the reason we have, for instance, religions causing wars is because of the need for the image to defend itself, which results in violence. So the stronger one's image is, the greater the insecurity actually, not security. Because any image is ultimately only put together by memory, and it is on very shaky ground. The only thing that is absolutely untouched by memory and therefore never in question is our own existence, which is pure being and which is Bhagavan. So when we see this, then we see everything as Bhagavan. So that's why, as we pointed in Uddhava Gita, Krishna says, see everything as me. And that is the universal vision. Vishwarupa also, Krishna gives it physically as a vision that everything is Krishna. When we see everything is Bhagavan, then we are freed of this partial, fragmented view of the world, saying he is right, he is wrong, this is right, this is wrong. None of that. And the ultimate truth is, even those are also an expression of the divine. So, as we just saw, even those who are caught in these images, even those who are engaging in violence of any kind, or those who are caught in ignorance, they are also an expression of the divine who are doing what is ordained. So we don't have to then argue with them, try to convince them, none of that. We just see this play of the divine. The divine, as we know, operates in three modes: tamas, rajas, and sattva. So even those who are caught in the ignorance of tamas is an expression of the divine. Those who are caught in the mode of rajas is expression of the divine, and those who are in sattva is expression of the divine. So when we see this, everything is Bhagavan, then we are free. We don't argue. That's why we don't see anyone from the great sages arguing with anyone. They just present what is the truth, and people feel the presence in their sanidhyam, as it's said, in their divine presence. And when we read a book like this too, we are in the same divine sanidhyam, and we don't have to then engage in any argument. The only truth that's pointed to, very simple, as we said from the beginning, is only God exists. So here also uses the word இயல்பாய் உள பொருளை, என்றும் எவர்க்கும் இயல்பாய் உள பொருளை. So இயல்பாய் உள பொருள் means that which is naturally existing always. The natural state of our existence is divine. Ula porul, the same word used in the very first verse. That which is all. See, the best word for God is that which is. The word God is itself, again, it's an English word. We use that. In Sanskrit, we have words such as Bhagavan, Ishvara. Sanskrit is more refined because we have different connotations, in fact, that come from this word. Ishvara is a word we use for the one who controls the universe. Bhagavan is the word we use for the one who holds all the various potencies. Brahman is the word we use for that which is infinite. Bhuma is another word. So there are so many words in Sanskrit, but every word is pointing to only one thing, which is that which is. So that is Ulla Porul. So that which is the truth of what is Bhagavan. Asti is the word, exists, isness. The isness of being is Bhagavan. That's why Satyam is Bhagavan. Whatever we call it. Bhagavatam, in fact, the very first verse of Bhagavatam is so beautiful, the way it defines God. Bhagavatam, again, is such a beautiful work of devotion and jnana. People, again, will not recognize this until they see it clearly. The very first verse of Bhagavatam only points to this truth. The verse is, again, we'll chant the verses, and the meaning of the verse, the verse is Janmadhyasya yato anvayadi taratascha artheshu abhignaswarat tene brahma hridaya adi kavaye muhyanti yat surayah tejo vari mridam yatha vinimayo yatra trisargo mrisha dhamna swena sada satyam param dhimahi. So the beauty of that verse is the beginning verse of Bhagavatam says Satyam param dhimahi. The name given to God is Satyam, again, truth. And when Krishna appears, the same name is given by Brahma, Satyam. So truth is the name of God, that which is Ulla Porul. And that Ulla Porul is our very existence too. So that's why in that verse 2 Bhagavatam it says that which is Satyam, which brings forth creation, sustenance and dissolution, which appears as this universe, which is the very sense of existence in all. To that I offer my obeisances. Satyam param dhimahi. So here also Ramana uses Satyam, Ulla Porul. So if we recognize that I exist because of Bhagavan, the very existence, if we stay with that, then we see that the same sense of existence is in everyone. So then there is no argument. The one who comes and argues is also an expression of the divine. So we don't have to then engage in an argument. We simply see them as divine, and that very vision of unconditional love can disarm someone if they are ready for it. Otherwise, they continue what they do, but regardless, it doesn't matter. So the important point here, that's why it's very radical that many people will perhaps miss, is that he says here, don't ever even argue about Advaita even. So it's not about Adu Ondru Irandu. So he says here, to say Advaita is the truth is again an identification with the ego, which is Maya. True Advaita is unspoken. To recognize that God alone exists is Advaita. And if we truly recognize it, then we can not argue with anyone. The one who says anything is also an expression of the same. So he says, leave it as Maya and do not argue with anyone. Remain ever in unconditional love. So if we see everyone as an expression of the divine, then our response is love. If we see everyone as individuals separate, then our response will be to either like them or dislike them, argue, take sides and all that. So to be free of that is to be free of Maya. Next verse, 35. சித்தமாய் உள்பொருளை தேர்ந்தெடுத்தல் சித்தி பிற சித்தி எல்லாம் சொப்பனமாம் சித்திகளே நித்திரை விட்டு ஓர்ந்தால் அவை மெய்யோ உண்மை நிலை நின்று பொய்மை தீர்ந்தார் தியங்குவரோ தேர். So it's a very beautiful verse again. Siddhi means in Sanskrit powers, or siddhi comes from the word siddha, which means perfection too. So siddhi means any power one has is called a siddhi. And normally in the spiritual realm especially, there is a lot of focus on siddhis, different kinds of powers. There are even 8 kinds of siddhis that are given, anima, mahima, and all that, making one small, making one big, becoming heavy, becoming light. All these physical siddhis are all given. There are many more appearing in another place, walking on water, waking people up from the dead. There are so many miracles that are attributed to so many saints and all that. But what he says here is, all those siddhis are only, he says beautifully, soppanamam siddhigale. They are all dream siddhis, because all of these are again from a relative conception. There are many who get into yoga, for example, and they want to build yogic powers of different kinds, and want to build these kinds of powers of floating in the air, or so many different things, this whole realm of siddhis is so much of a distraction, especially in the way of sadhana. And so here it's pointed out that true siddhi is to abide as your own true self and be surrendered to God. Siddhamai ulporulai தேர்ந்தெடுத்தல் siddhi. See, again and again here also ulporul. The only word is used is to be surrendered to that which is. That is siddhi. And in fact, it is said that even those siddhis can be seen in the right way. To make oneself small is to be actually free of the ego. That is to truly make oneself small. To make oneself light is to truly remain very humble. So these are all the ways in which truly we can understand the siddhis. If we try to physically gain some of these siddhis of becoming small or big or walking on water, there is a famous story even that many might have heard, where it is said that someone practiced for 12 years to walk on water, and he came very proudly and he said, I practiced 12 years of sadhana and now I'm able to walk on water. And so the other person said, So all these 12 years you have spent, you basically profited by 25 paise, he said. Because at that time, the charge for taking a boat was 25 paise to cross the river. So he said, your entire effort is worth that set, right? Like even today, so many things we take for granted would have been considered a siddhi 100 years ago, right? We are able to do a video call with India easily. That is considered, that would have been considered a siddhi. So many things we do, right? And things keep on, with AI coming, there's so many things that are coming. So the thing is, in the realm of matter, there is always going to be more and more expansions of energy that bring forth different forms of intelligence. See, the entire universe is an expression of the cosmic intelligence, what's called Mahat Tattva. And this Mahat Tattva is infinite, and it is beyond understanding. So we can never, as we know well, even one topic, if you go to Google, we will find literally unlimited number of results if you go deeper. So to understand even one topic is very hard, and this universe is made of so many topics, and all that is in one small blue dot we are living on. And this blue dot is nothing if we look at the whole galaxy, and then we look at our own galaxy, it's nothing if you look at the universe. So it's an infinite universe even at the level of manifest expression. And therefore, any siddhi we acquire is very puny. And siddhi also applies to other things, like considering oneself very smart or very this or that. Everything is just very limited. The ultimate siddhi, as he says, is to recognize that it's all an expression of God. So the only source of all siddhis is Bhagavan. So then we don't have to claim ownership of any siddhi. We don't have to experience anything. We don't have to gain any new power, because we are already actually an expression of so many siddhis. The very sight, for example, is a siddhi. When we see an object, how the image is rendered in the brain, if we study the complexity involved in sight happening in our brain, it's a miracle. Even the best, most sophisticated camera cannot come anywhere close to the resolution that our eyes are providing in terms of vision. Same with hearing, same with every little faculty. So we are already, the human body is itself a phenomenal expression of siddhis. Right now, whatever lunch we had is being digested, and it's happening so perfectly. Breathing is happening perfectly. So there is nobody here doing anything. There is no me digesting the food, no me circulating the blood, no me breathing the air. It's all happening, and that's all siddhi, actually. Everything is an expression of the divine intelligence. So compared to that, what is the big thing of, let's say, floating in the air? There are so many birds. A mosquito flies. If you see a mosquito, we don't recognize, we see it as a nuisance. But if you notice how little mosquito can fly. So I went to Alaska once, and they have a T-shirt where it said, "Our state bird is mosquito," because they have a lot of mosquitoes there. So mosquito is actually a bird. We don't recognize it because it flies, right? So flying is a siddhi, we think, but a small mosquito can fly. So in this way, nature has so many siddhis. And so all of this belongs to Bhagavan, who permeates this whole universe. So the expression of every atom of this universe is Bhagavan. So we have to be always very clear, therefore, that when we speak of God, when we speak of Bhagavan, we are speaking of that which permeates the whole universe. So the word Bhagavan, especially, for example, in Sanskrit, is a beautiful word, because it says the one who, it says, has 6 opulences. For instance, Aishwarya, all power; Vairagya, total renunciation; Yasha, total fame. So like this, there are 6 given. So who has all of this six? If you look at it, it's not any conception of the mind that can have any of these six. It's the whole universe. So that's why Vishnu Sahasranamam, for instance, begins with the first word is Vishwam. So the name of Bhagavan is Vishwam Vishnur Vashatkaro Bhuta Bhavya Bhavat Prabhu. So the first name of Vishnu is Vishwam. So he is the universe. It's not that the most important recognition is that the universe is non-different from Bhagavan. The creator and the creation are the same. That's why he is called Vishwam. He didn't say Vishwasya Karta. It's not calling Vishnu as the creator of the universe. Bhishma calls him Vishwam. He says, you are the universe. So the very universe is Bhagavan. So that universe which is manifesting through these infinite powers in every single planet, every single galaxy is what brings forth all the siddhis. So we don't have to then to claim that I have some siddhi is ridiculous, is what he says. It's swapanamam, it's like a dream. So therefore don't bother with siddhis, but simply surrender and be therefore free of this idea. Because when you are caught in siddhi especially, that's the worst way to be caught in ego. We think we have some power and then we are caught in it. In fact, there's a beautiful small anecdote. Once someone came to Ramana Maharshi and he said that the one who has siddhis is worse than a magician. So the magician does magic and all the rest, and the one who has siddhis does siddhi. So apparently the person listening to him was thinking, yeah, I can understand that siddhis are impermanent and it's very limited, but why is it worse than a magician? It's just the same as a magician. A magician does magic tricks. The one who has siddhi does siddhis. So the next day, coincidentally, someone brought something called Rama Gita, which is the instruction of Ram to Lakshmana. And there exactly a verse was given. I believe it comes from Adhyatma Ramayana, where Ram tells Lakshman the exact same thing. He says, the difference between a magician and one who has siddhi is, at least the magician doesn't believe in his own tricks. Right? So the one who has siddhi believes in that too. He thinks I'm so great, and he's deluded by that egoic identification. At least a magician fools others. He doesn't get fooled himself. The one with siddhi fools himself first. So that's why he's worse. So the answer was given to him by Rama Gita. So that's the pointer here, is that any siddhi is only going to delude us. So whatever comes up naturally, if we just surrender it to Bhagavan and say it happens because of the divine intelligence. So if somebody is good at music, let's say somebody is singing well, you have to very clearly recognize that the singing is a beautiful skill that comes from Bhagavan. If someone is very good at math, same thing. Everyone is good at different things, and all of this is coming from the one source of all intelligence. So there's nobody to claim ownership of this as mine. And if we don't claim ownership of it, then we are free. We can offer our music as a divine service. We can offer our math as a divine service. Whatever it might be, we can engage in it without being caught in it as mine. So that's the whole pointer of not being caught in siddhis, especially powerful siddhis. The more powerful they are, in fact, that's why they say it's harder. The more talented one is, the harder it is for him to realize the truth, because the ego gets very identified with it. So to be not identified with any talents one is blessed with, but to offer it to God is the right way to use the talents. Then we can offer the music, let's say, for example, as a service to all, without being caught in it, without ever taking ownership of it, without being flattered by someone praising the music, any of that. If we are caught in it, then we are affected by it. Verse 36. நாம் உடல் என்று எண்ணின் அலம் நாம் அது என்று எண்ணும் அது நாம் அதுவாய் நிற்பதற்கு நல் துணையே ஆம் என்றும் நாம் அது என்று எண்ணுவது ஏன் நான் மனிதன் என்று எண்ணுமோ நாம் அதுவாய் நிற்கும் அதனால். So this verse points out again that because we are identified with the body, someone says you are not the body, you are the truth that is present all through the universe. But then he says, but one doesn't have to keep on repeating that like a japa, just as we don't ever keep on saying I am a human. It's naturally there, non-manidan. So we say that we don't ever keep repeating that I am a human, I'm not an animal, I'm a human. We don't do a thing around it, right? So because it's very naturally there that we are humans, biologically that is. So inwardly, similarly, he says, if we recognize that I am not this body, the body keeps changing, thoughts keep changing, everything changes. The sense of existence, which is pure consciousness, remains ever true. Then we can simply remain in that recognition without being caught in simply making it into a memory. So the whole pointer is not to keep repeating ourselves. That's why many people, for example, they say aham brahmasmi or anything like this. It becomes another memory that is built. So the whole pointer here is not to keep affirming anything, but recognize that our very nature is that, and surrender and be abiding as that. So that's why in another verse, not in this work, he says, even to ask who am I, it's like a drunken man asking who am I, he says elsewhere. Because you have to ask really only once. If you are very perceptive, we can only ask once and recognize that I am not all this that I take myself to be, and that which rises is the sense of existence, and that very sense of existence that rises in my heart is Bhagavan, and therefore I surrender to that with love. And when love awakens in the heart, and we see that it is the divine that is expressing through this body and through all the bodies and through the whole universe, then we are in that current of love, which doesn't require any mental affirmation. But if we keep on mentally affirming, I am not the body, I am that, I am Brahman, many who get into, let's say, what's called as, that's why dry Vedanta, it's not true Vedanta. Vedanta literally means this, what we are learning is Vedanta, which is ending of knowledge, ending of memory actually, in a sense, which is directly perceiving the truth of our existence as Bhagavan. But if it becomes dry, in Tamil there is even an expression, they call it Varattu Vedantam. Varattu means dry. So dry Vedanta is that which simply makes it into a theory and then makes it another intellectual framework and keep on discussing it and debating it and all of that. True Vedanta is not dry, it is the awakening of true love and devotion is Vedanta. Because if you are truly recognizing that my very existence belongs to Bhagavan, then we don't have to ever affirm anything. We don't have to say I am that, because that alone is, he said, recognize Bhagavan as the only truth of existence itself, and we see him in everyone and everything, and we don't have to then make it an intellectual exercise anymore. So that's the whole pointer. We are continue with verse 37. We have 4 more verses to go, and then we'll take some questions and then we will wrap up. Verse 37. சாதகத்திலே துவிதம் சாத்தியத்தில் அத்விதம் ஓதுகின்ற வாதம் அதும் உண்மையல ஆதரவாய் தான் தேடுங்காலும் தன்னை அடைந்த காலத்தும் தான் தசமனன்றி யார் தான். So here it's a very important verse which is again pointing to the fact that there is no division between sadhana and sadhya. So sadhana is the process of what we realize, and sadhya is that realization. So there are many who say that there is dvaita or duality in sadhana, and there is advaita when the realization happens. This is commonly seen even among so many teachers, saintly people, so on. But a true sage never admits of this false dichotomy. So here he says, to say that there is dvaita in sadhana and there is advaita upon realization is wrong, because the truth doesn't change between sadhana and sadhya. So there's multiple reasons this is important, because first is that if advaita is something that comes as an effort due to sadhana, then it is also time bound. That which comes in time goes away in time too. Every little thing that comes in time goes away. Every experience, even those who have had great experiences in meditation, for instance, no experience lasts. Even if we have a completely still mind, let's say, it is going to change. So the important recognition, therefore, is that everything that comes goes. So if advaita or non-duality is something that comes because of sadhana, it will also go, which will essentially negate the truth of advaita. So what he points to, therefore, is advaita or non-duality is the truth of what is. The way to understand the word advaita, which is probably more helpful, is no otherness. So when we say advaita, no duality is the literal translation. Another word which is a synonym of that is ananya, which means no other. So we normally operate out of otherness. So we think I am one and you are other and he is other, she is other, and so on. And in this otherness, we create division. Then we project a God who is also other. We think God is outside me in time and space. And then we, because of that, have various divisions, and then we build goals out of it, and so on. If advaita is a state that comes out of such sense of division and it goes away because of some process, then that going away will also not last. So no otherness means the very assumption that there are others, there are different entities, is rooted in ignorance. That is the pointer of Advaita. Advaita is not, therefore, a state to be realized, it is the truth of what is. That's why the repeated expression used is Ulla Porul, that which is. That which is not going to change depending on what we do or what we do not do. The change is whether we realize it or we are ignorant of it. So a classic example given, therefore, is, there are many examples. One example that's given is if there is a snake, if there is a rope and we mistake it to be a snake because it's dark, then someone puts the light on and we say, no, it's just a rope. It's not a snake. The snake was never there, right? It was only the rope. The snake was only our imagination, and that imagination went away. But there was no duality even when we were ignorant. That is the whole point. There was no snake in that example. There was always the rope. We took it as snake when we were ignorant, and when we realized the truth, we see that it as only a rope. But even when we saw the rope, or even when we saw the snake, there was only the rope. The example given here is a different example, which is also beautiful. Dashaman means the 10th man. So there is a common story that comes in many Vedantic works, which is that they said 10 people crossed a river, and the 10 people wanted to count if everybody crossed the river. So what they did was, and this example is used in many contexts, it's very nice because they said they counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and the guy forgot to count himself. So he said, oh, only 9 people have crossed. Then the next person started counting. He also did 1, 2, 3, 4, and he didn't count himself. So everybody counted only 9. So everybody said, oh, we've lost someone, and they were all crying. And then a passerby comes and he said, why are you crying? Because we started out as 10 people, and now there's only 9 people here who have crossed. But then he obviously sees there are 10. So he says, how do you say it's only 9? Because we counted. So he says, okay, count in front of me. So the person again does 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then the passerby takes his hand and then turns it and says, see, this is 10th. You are the 10th, right? And that's what the guru does, by the way. So the guru is the one who points to your own self and says, you already exist that you are looking for. But in this example, what's pointed to is there are 10 always. It's not that the passerby came and the 10th man appeared because of that. There was 10 all the time, but we were ignorantly counting only 9 because we were not counting ourselves. Then the guy who comes and points out, you are the 10th, reveals the truth of what already was but was missed. So that is what Advaita means. Advaita means recognizing the ever-existent truth and not creating some state that comes and goes. That's why Shankara says in the Bhashyam beautifully that jnana and karma can never be combined, because anything that comes out of karma is in time. So there is a whole commentary he writes on jnana karma samuchaya, because many people who say we have to engage in action and through action and knowledge we realize, but he's very radically and clearly says action belongs to time and wisdom is timeless. You cannot mix the time and the timeless. So that which is in time belongs to time, that which is timeless is timeless. So that which is in time will come and go. Any karma will only result in temporary result. So wisdom can never be a product of karma. That is why Shankara beautifully points out that becoming and being can never be mixed. Karma is in the realm of becoming, jnana is being. So that's why any activity we engage in, whether it's reading books, whether it's doing yoga sadhana, whether it is doing anything, is not going to give anything for us in the realm of becoming. We are not going to become anything that we already were not. The whole pointer of sadhana, therefore, is not a process of gathering anything, but to only shed ignorance. If we remove the ignorance in our heart that I am a separate entity, I am a separate individual, and we surrender completely to Bhagavan in full jnana, full wisdom, which leads to full bhakti, that is Advaita. It is not, therefore, a product of doing anything. In fact, in one expression in Vivek Chudamani, it is said, Swaswarupa Anusandhanam Bhakti Riti Abhidiyate. He says, to abide as oneself is bhakti. Very beautiful definition of bhakti. Shankara says, Swaswarupa Anusandhanam Bhakti Riti Abhidiyate. So, which is to say, to recognize that my very existence is coming forth from Bhagavan, and all there is only Bhagavan, is Advaita. Then there is no other, as Krishna says in the Gita, Vasudeva Sarvamiti. Everything is Vasudeva then. So a question can come up, as was asked, as to the form of Bhagavan. And does Advaita say Bhagavan is formless? So this is again a question that comes because, as already pointed out in a different verse, we want to make some assertion based on philosophy about whether God has form or not. But what true Advaita points to is everything is God's form. So when Bhagavan appears as an avatar too, that is the special form he takes as Krishna. But the very same Krishna says that I am the essence of everything there is. Right? So in the same Gita, for instance, Krishna says, I am the very digestion in you. So he goes, so just to take an example of how beautifully Gita points to very simple, direct ways in which we miss Bhagavan. Krishna says, Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva Praninam Dehamashritah Pranapana Samayuktaha Pachamyunam Chaturvidam. He says, I remain in the stomach of everyone as the digestive fire and digest the 4 types of food. So who is Krishna then? So is Krishna the form who is the son of Devaki and Vasudeva, who is the beautiful boy who plays in Vrindavan, who beautifully charioteered Arjuna? Or is Krishna the one who is sitting in our heart, or the one who is within the stomach as the digestive fire? The answer is all. There is no division between anything. So it is the sweet Krishna who comes in the form as Gopal. He grows into beautiful Shyama Sundara. He is the charioteer as Madhava for Arjuna. And he is also the self of all as Atma. Aham Atma Gudakesha Sarva Bhuta Shayasthita. And he is the intelligence that permeates the whole universe. So therefore, Krishna can be celebrated in every form. That is the answer to that, is that Krishna is the form and the formless. Every form is the form of Krishna actually, but when he takes the special form as Krishna, he manifests all the opulences with such sweet pastimes that it's so beautiful to listen to and it invokes devotion. But the same Krishna appears as all the other forms as well, as all there is. So when we recognize this, then we are free of this conflict between duality and non-duality, form and formless, all of that. So that's why here it's pointed out that truth alone exists all the time. God alone exists all the time. It is not that now I exist, God exists separately, and then after some realization, I will cease to exist and God exists. No. Even now, God alone exists. But I take myself to be falsely a separate ego, and that is my illusion, and that illusion goes away through jnana, through wisdom, which is bhakti. So that is the key pointer. Therefore, to say that Dvaita first, Advaita later, or to divide between Vyavaharika and Adhyatmika, all of this comes out of the mind which is fragmented. They say, for instance, that the wisdom of self-knowledge is good for Adhyatmika but not for Vyavaharika. But that is, how can that be if truth is all-pervading? So when we are engaging in the world too, if we recognize the non-dual nature, then we treat everyone as we treat ourselves. So when we, best example given is our own body. So when we look at our body, our eyes, let's say, have a dust, our fingers immediately takes care of it. The fingers are separate, the eyes are separate, but the finger doesn't think the eyes are someone else's, right? There is an instinctive love that is there, and that love can come in Vyavaharika towards everyone if we operate in this recognition that everything is the body of Bhagavan. So that's the vision Bhagavan gives in Gita. In Vishwarupa Darshana, Krishna shows that. So that's the other form. So Krishna's form, that's why, can never be limited, because he shows in the Vishwarupa Darshana, which bewilders Arjuna. He shows that the whole universe is me. Everyone, the Kauravas, the Pandavas, the army men, the various animals, the universes, the deities, the devatas, everyone is in him, in the body. And that body is also Krishna. So when we recognize that, then we are all part of the body of Krishna as we take ourselves. Then there is no duality even in Vyavaharika. When we transact with others, we are transacting with different parts of the same one infinite expression. So just as the hands feed the stomach, the hands don't think they are serving the stomach even. They just, it's a natural response, right? The stomach feels hungry, the hand takes food, the mouth chews it, the stomach eats it, and then the stomach in turn sends energy to all the limbs. So the whole process is one interconnected unit. And that is the whole nature of the universe too. That is the vision of Vishwarupa. Krishna shows just as your body is one unit, the whole universe is actually one unit, which is the expression of the divine. So when we recognize this, then we see someone in pain, we immediately respond to that naturally. We don't have to then think I'm doing anything or I'm serving or none of that. It's just a natural response out of being in affection. That affection, in fact, it's a nice word because affection means we are affected by it. So when I'm affected by something, I respond. Normally, I'm affected when my body is going through something. But if I'm affected by what is happening to the other person, that's true affection. That affection comes when we recognize the truth that there is only one all-pervading intelligence in this world. So there is no other, Ananya. So that is Advaita. Advaita means Ananya. Both are same. No other, no duality. That's why once when someone asked Ramana Maharshi, how do we treat others? So every sage or rather every saintly being will give different answers, which are all valid. They would say that we have to be kind to others, be nice to others, love others, this, others, that, all that is true. But Ramana Maharshi had a very simple, direct answer. He said, there are no others. So that is the Mahavakya. If you recognize that there are no others, everyone and everything is an expression of the same, then we respond naturally with all that will follow. Love and compassion and everything. We will take care of everyone as we take care of ourselves. So that is the true expression of non-duality. Therefore, non-duality is not some theory to be held in the head and we function differently in the world. No, it's one integral expression of love that comes forth by recognizing that all that exists is Bhagavan. So that's Advaita, and that is the truth even now. We just don't see it. So when we see it clearly, we are freed of this false identification with the body and mind, and we operate freely without any partial attachment, but with universal love. Verse 38, Vinay Mudal Ayan, Vinay Vilay Payan Tuipom, Vinay Mudal Ar Endru Vinavit Tanayariya, Kartrutvam Poi Karumam Mundrum Kadalum Nittamam Mukti Nilai. So he says here that if we inquire into the nature of doership, so we normally talk of karma because we have a sense of doership. And the sense of doership is what makes us feel that we have karma. And this attachment to karma then causes bondage because we do something out of desire and then we get to experience the result of it. It brings forth suffering and all of that. So here again, the same thing is expressed in a different way, that the whole theory of karma is based on again a false assumption that I am a separate individual. The direct wisdom is that all karma is done only by Bhagavan. Then we are not caught in the identification as doer of the karma. Kartrutvam goes away, and when Kartrutvam goes away, then karma also loses its bondage on us. Actions go on, actions don't stop, but the attachment that I am the doer of the action goes away. And because of that, we are freed of this identification with what this identification with attachment or identification with the sense of doership. See, when we think of karma, the best way to look at it is, if we watch a movie, let's say, and we see that various characters are there in the movie, and we ascribe doership to each character in the movie, and we say this character did this character did that, and then the character goes through whatever they go through. But if we truly see, the truth of the whole thing is that the entire movie is going through according to the script of the director of the movie. So in a similar way, this entire universe is according to the cosmic intelligence of the one director, the cosmic director, who is Bhagavan. All the characters in this movie of the universe go through various activities as ordained by the one universal supreme being. So as long as we don't see that, and we are partially identified with the character, so we take ourselves as the character who is doing these actions, then we are caught in theories of karma, in cause and effect. Then there are said to be three types of karmas: prarabdha, sanchita, and agami. So prarabdha karma is that which is supposed to have started in this birth. Sanchita karma is the entire repository of karma that is there, and agami is the new karma we acquire. All these theories are there, which are all valid at a relative level. But what he says here beautifully is moonrum karalu, meaning all three goes away when doership goes away. So a nice example he gives is, if a man has, so we take the example of, let's say, Dasharatha. So Dasharatha had 3 wives, and Dasharatha dies, and all 3 became widow at the same time. Right? So similarly, here Ramana Maharshi says, if the doer is the, in this metaphor, the doership, the ignorance of doership is the husband, and the 3 wives are the 3 types of karmas. And when the doership notion goes away, all the 3 become widow at the same time, because some would argue that new karma is not acquired, but existing karma has to continue, and so on. So he negates all those arguments by saying prarabdha, sanchita, agami, all karmas are only for the false sense of doer. When the doership goes away, then all there is the expression of the universal intelligence, which is what is there even before, but there was a false assumption that I am doing this. That false assumption causes me to get identified with it. So when that identification goes away, then we are free of all karmas. Actions go on through us, but we don't claim ownership of it. We recognize that actions happen through us, not by us. And that recognition is freedom. Then actions happen through us as they are ordained, and the results of the actions also happen as ordained, and we are neither the owner of the action nor the enjoyer of the result. So that's why Krishna says in the Gita, Bhoktaram Yajñatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. He says, know me as the doer and the enjoyer of all. So it is the one universal being who is the doer and the enjoyer of all. The moment I think I am the doer and I am the enjoyer, I am in ignorance, and that causes karma, that causes next life, all that. So that's why when anyone asks Ramana Maharshi about what about my past life or next life, he had a very beautiful answer. Again, that's the response of a sage, which is different from many saintly people. Saints will give response which is correct at a certain level, but the sage points to the highest truth, that he said, find out if anyone is living right now before worrying about your past life or next life. Because the assumption that I exist now as a separate individual is the root of this question about my past life and my next life. The truth is, you don't exist as an individual right now. You see that clearly, then you don't have to worry about past life and next life. But as long as you're identified with it, then yes, past life and next life, all this matters. So to not worry about all this, but to recognize the truth that Bhagavan alone exists is wisdom. So that's what this verse points to. Verse 39. பக்தன் நான் என்னும் மட்டே பந்தமுக்தி சிந்தனைகள் பக்தன் யார் என்று தன்னை பார்க்கும் கால் சித்தமாய் நித்தமுத்தன் தான் நிற்க நிற்காதேல் பந்த சிந்தை முக்தி சிந்தை முன் நிற்குமோ. So the word bhaktan is different from bhaktan. It's easy to mix the two. Bhaktan means the one who is in bondage. Bandha is the word in Sanskrit that becomes bhaktan, means the one in bondage. And he says the one in bondage, as long as assumed to be true, then the concept of bandha and moksha are true. So again, it's a different point to see. Every verse points to the same truth in different ways beautifully. Here the idea that's pointed to is the fact that I exist as an expression of the Supreme One Divine Being. When that is not seen, and I take myself to be a separate individual, then the question comes of bondage and liberation. I feel like I'm in bondage. I need to get liberated. But the important question is, who is in bondage and who can get liberated? So that's why he says, when we question who is in bondage, then the very idea that bandha and moksha, bondage and liberation exist, goes out the window. So Gaudapadacharya very famously and beautifully wrote, that's why na baddho na cha sadhakah na mumukshu na vai mukta ityesha paramarthata. He wrote, there is nobody who is bound, na baddho, that's the exact word used here. Bhaktan in Tamil is na baddho. There is nobody who is in bondage. There is nobody who is a mumukshu, who is desiring liberation. There is no such thing as moksha. This is the highest truth. So what does that mean? That means that, again, everything and everyone is only an expression of the divine. So if the divine it's like someone playing the role of every character. Let's imagine that there is a movie where the same director plays the role of every character. And each character seems to go through different experiences. And the director is so good that the actor forgets that he is the director. And therefore the actor is caught in this idea that I have to do this and do that. So that's the situation of this. The same Bhagavan who has expanded as all of this for his own Leela goes through this apparent forgetfulness of his true nature. That's why in Lalita Sahasranamam it's said very beautifully that she is the one who gives ignorance and she is the one who gives grace. Both come from her. So the ignorance is also a product of the same divine energy. The ignorance that takes us to be the ego and therefore thinks I'm in bondage, I need to realize God, I need to find God. All of this is coming from the same divine energy. And then the grace that comes, anugraha, which shows that you are never separate from God. In fact, you do not exist as separate. God alone exists. And God is playing the role of you as of anyone else. That anugraha, that grace is the Guru. That is also the divine energy coming as grace. So anugraha Shakti and avarana Shakti are both coming from her. So the ignorance makes us think there is bondage and there is liberation. Realization gives us the truth that there is no bondage, there is no liberation, there is only that, which is Bhagavan. So then the natural response is to live free of fear, free of desire, and live in unconditional love. So everyone and everything being an expression of the divine. We are free of seeking anything, and we can just see the divine in all, and therefore be in true unconditional love of God in everyone. So when we have love of God, it has to result in love of everyone. Otherwise, the love of God remains partial. If we only have a love of God that is based on our mental projection, then we are not truly loving God. So in Bhagavatam again, in Kapilopakyanam, he says beautifully that the one, Kapila who is an avatar of Bhagavan. So Kapila is one of the avatars who instructs his mother Devahuti, and he says, the one who goes to temples and worships but doesn't see me in everyone, his devotion is unripe. That's what he says. So one who goes only to see God in certain places or certain forms, but doesn't see God in everyone and everything, his devotion is unripe, as sage Kapila or Kapila Avatar says. So the true devotion which is fully ripe is to see Bhagavan in everyone and everything. So that's what frees us of this idea of even bondage and liberation. That's why a Bhagavata is not interested in moksha. So in Bhagavatam, that's why in many places it says, the one who is free of the desire for moksha is a Bhagavata. Because moksha is still again a selfish desire ultimately. Only the false self desires moksha. When the desire for moksha goes away, then there remains true surrender, which is love. Last verse of this beautiful work. Uruvam, Aruvam, Uruvaruvam, Moonram, Urum Mukti Enil Uraipan, Uruvam, Aruvam, Uruvaruvam, Ayum Ahandai, Uru Aridal Mukti Unar. So this is again very beautifully the point we just brought up about form and formless. Uruvam, Aruvam, form and formless. He says, he puts a question, what is the truth? Is it form or formless, or a mix of form and formless? And he says, the answer to that is, to be free of the ego that asks that question is the truth. So the ego alone wants to, and it is a very natural thing. It is, when we say the ego is in everyone. Everyone is, that is the reason why we take ourselves to be the body. We have desires, we have comparison, we have envy. Everything is a manifestation of the ego, and it's there universally. You go to any culture, any place, anywhere, everyone has got ego in different ways. Some is very tamasic ego which causes harm, some is rajasic ego, and some is very sattvic ego too. When one is interested in God, still that ego wants to understand whether God has got form or formless. It is very natural. But he says here, to be free of that is true liberation. That is, to recognize that God is both form and formless, and therefore to be free of this debate between form and formless, and recognize that everything, form, formless, a mixture of two, all of that is an expression of the divine. Therefore, divine alone exists, and not engage in any debates and lose the false ego. That's liberation. So that's the last verse of Ulladu Narpadu. So with this we conclude this beautiful work Ulladu Narpadu. As we saw already, Ulladu Narpadu is a work that simply and yet most profoundly points us to the truth of our own being. It points out to the simple, direct recognition that our very sense of existence is Bhagavan. We always seek for God through either some form or through some experiences or through various ways in which we project through time and space. But what is pointed out directly is God is the most nearest thing available. In fact, He is our very existence. Ulla Porul is the word used in Tamil. As we again said, we began with it and we can end with the same first expression of this word, which is Ulladalad Ulla Porul Ullado. Does the sense of existence come forth without the truth of what is? And the truth of what is Bhagavan. So the word Satyam, as we pointed out repeatedly, is the name of Bhagavan. And that truth, which is the heart of our own existence, which announces itself as I in our very heart, is the voice of Bhagavan. And that alone comes forth as all the faculties, all the activities, and expands in the universe as all the various senses, various elements, and all of it. Everything happens from the ground of existence. So the simple and direct truth is our very existence is divine. So we don't have to seek the divine through any other activity, but to recognize directly that our very existence is divine. And therefore, the existence of everyone, everything, everywhere, every moment is divine. And when we see this divinity all pervading in us and around us, then we are situated in true wisdom, which is unconditional love. And that wisdom, which flowers as unconditional love in the heart, is the perfection of life itself, because then human life becomes a beautiful offering where everything we have is an expression of the divine offered as a service to the divine. And that is the perfection of human life. And that is what Ulladu Narpadu points to. And we have collectively gone through all the 40 verses plus 2, as I always say, 42 verses. And we have completed Ulladu Narpadu, which happens always only by grace. It is Bhagavan's grace. As we said, grace is ever present and it manifests in various ways, and it alone makes us to come together in satsang and to listen to this, to read this, to discuss this, and to contemplate on it and to actualize it. So that is the work of grace, and it is grace that took the form of Ramana Maharshi to give this wisdom. Grace takes many forms. One of the most beautiful forms is that of Ramana to give this work of Ulladu Narpadu, and grace comes in the form of satsang. We in fact began Ulladu Narpadu by glorifying the power of satsang, and we can end by the same, because satsang is the power of coming together in truth. As Shankara says, satsangatve nisangatvam, nisangatve nirmohatvam, nirmohatve nischalatatvam, nischalatatve jivan mukti. So by satsanga, we get freed of false attachments, we lose our delusions, our mind becomes still and tranquil, and we realize the truth. So satsang is the root of everything. So that's why in Bhagavatam 2, repeatedly it says, seek satsang. Nothing else you need to do. You don't need to sit and do any other meditation. You don't need to do any japa. You don't need to do any chants. Get together in satsang, and that collective energy of getting together in satsang with singular focus on Bhagavan brings forth the field of grace, which is effortlessly felt when we are together. That's why in Gita 2, Krishna says, my devotees come together and talk about me and discuss me, and they are in great joy. That's what we do. So it's very simple process of getting in satsang. When we get together, we discuss the nature of truth. It brings forth great joy. It frees us of all suffering. It makes us recognize the ever-present truth that is all pervading, that is unaffected, untouched, that is unlimited, and that is expressing itself through various names and forms such as me and you and others. By recognizing this and seeing Bhagavan in everyone and everything, we remain in satsang, and satsang takes us to the realization of the truth here and now. So that is the glory of satsang, and we have had this Ulladu Narpadu satsang over many weeks, and we have completed this work today. So our eternal gratitude to Bhagavan and to this work Ulladu Narpadu, and to be able to dive into it and soak in these waters of wisdom and love. So anyway, it's a great blessing to be in satsang, as I already said, and to come together both physically in person and online. And see, normally when we meet, as we know, we can talk about many things, right? We can talk about the weather or talk about different topics, mundane topics or whatever. But this is the highest purpose of discussion. So in Bhagavatam 2, again, Ambarish Maharaj says beautifully that use every sense in service of God. Then you are never going to be away from God. So you can use the tongue to speak of Bhagavan, you can use the ears to hear about him, you can use the eyes to see him in various forms, you can use the smell to, for instance, have divine fragrances around. And he says beautifully, you can use a sense of touch to touch the lotus feet of devotees. So in this way, we can use all the senses in the service of Bhagavan. Then we don't have to, normally in yoga and all, for instance, there is a lot of focus on controlling the senses. But we don't have to control the senses, but we just have to engage them in the divine. And that is what is the purpose of satsang. So satsang is so beautiful because it doesn't try to take the senses away from what they are naturally going toward, but it takes them outwardly, but yet it takes them inwardly. That's the magic of satsang. We are discussing the highest wisdom. We are listening to it. We are contemplating upon it, and there is a natural stillness that comes. We feel the heart awaken. It is not an activity of the mind then. We feel the presence of Bhagavan amidst us when we invoke these teachings, and thereby we come directly in contact with it, and we carry that, and we can then make every moment a satsang, because we can live in this recognition and bring satsang to every interaction as well. But it's anchored in getting together as a group when we can to do this. So thank you everyone for being part of satsang, and it is the greatest blessing. Thank you.